Good day, this is Donalea P. Buendia, and our topic for today is about philosophical self. Okay, so specifically, this is more on the different philosophers, self consciousness, and the self from Descartes to Kant. So, we are going to evaluate the different philosophies of different philosophers, okay, that are included for this topic. So the first philosopher given is René Descartes. I know that you have heard his name before, not only in the subject philosophy, not only here in the subject understanding the self, but of course in mathematics. All right. So who is René Descartes? He is considered to be the father of modern philosophy. He studied in the Jesuit College of La Flèche. Okay, and he, aside from being a philosopher, he's also a mathematician. Okay, so I know that you have heard his name in a specific branch of mathematics. Later, we're gonna find out. Okay, so he is also knowledgeable in classics, law, medicine. Okay, and of course in modern science and mathematics. The first book was A Defense of Copernicus, which he prudently did not publish. All right. So, aside from philosophy, medicine, law, so he is also into analytic geometry. Okay. And he used this discovery as a model for the rest of his career in analytical geometry. Okay. Basing the principles of philosophy and theology on a similar mathematical basis, he was able to develop method in philosophy that could be carried through according to individual reason and that no longer depended upon appeal to authorities whose insights and methods were questionable. So imagine how genius he is, okay, linking and associating philosophy and mathematical principles in one. Right. So some of the writings that he created or he finished before is the Discourse in Method in 1637, okay, and also Meditations on First Philosophy, which is not published until 1641, okay, which aimed to re-examine the foundations of philosophy. He sought a basic promise from which, as in a geometrical proof, he could deduce all those principles that could be known with certainty. Okay, so one of his tagline is the thing that thinks. Okay, so this is what he says. Okay, from his writing Meditations on First Philosophy. But what then am I? A thing which thinks. What is a thing which thinks? It is a thing which doubts, understands, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, which also imagines and feels. So, in other words, for you to be considered as a human being, you must have the power of cognition, the thinking process. That is how you think. Okay, and when you are thinking, you also express it, and that is the aspect of feeling. Okay, so this consciousness allow us to know that we exist, which is composed of our soul, okay, a substance. So for him, self-identity depends on consciousness. Okay, so the next philosopher we have John Locke. All right, so John Locke spent early life in the English countryside, but actually much of his mature life has been spent in politics. Okay, he joined a group that was fighting for the overthrow of the government. Okay, he also taught philosophy and the classics at Oxford until he earned a medical degree and turned to medicine. So he is a doctor. He is also into politics and he is into philosophy. Okay, and then since he has this kind of involvement in some politics issues, he forced to flee England in 1683. Then he lived in Holland until the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Okay, so he also received a government position but spent most of his time in writing. So some of his writings include Treatises on Government in 1689, Okay, so this is to justify the revolution and its political principles. And another is the essay concerning human understanding in 1690, which has been written during exile. Okay, so aside from this information, he is also known as the founder of British empiricism and also the father of modern political liberalism. Okay, so John Locke, okay, distinguishes between a substance, which is the soul, and the consciousness. In philosophy, there is such a belief called dualism, wherein the mental aspect and the physical aspect are actually subdivided into different substances. Okay? According to him, self identity depends on our having the same consciousness and memories, which actually that's a reason why he came up with two objections. Okay, according to him, we forget much of what we experience. Okay, and our memories are not always accurate. Well, I agree with the second one and also with the first one. Okay, we forget much of what we experience. You know, if at some point of your life there has been a phenomenon called deja vu, okay, and you are not aware that it has, I mean, you are semi aware that it happened already before, maybe it existed in your dreams, and some of what we experience are not too accurate. Okay, our memories are not always that accurate. Okay, especially during the examination, am I right? Okay, our memories are not always accurate. Okay, so next we have David Hume. Okay, so who is David Hume? All right, so David Hume is actually a very brilliant person. He is an outstanding genius of British philosophy. Okay, so this person is a very extroverted person. Okay, he is born in Scotland, Edinburgh. He spent much of his life and he often traveled to London and Paris. Okay, now since this person is very outspoken, extrovert, brilliant, genius, intellectual, okay, he achieved notoriety as well as literary fame in his lifetime. But he was involved in scandals and he was proscribed by the church. Okay, by the way, I just want to mention this one of his writing, The Treatise of Human Nature in 1739. Okay, so then what happened? So uh, he really wanted to become a professor. Okay, but then he was rejected by certain universities because of heresies, wherein there are some beliefs that are against the religious belief of the church. Okay, and because of this scandal, he was not accepted to become professor. Okay, and but this person, being a very extrovert person, he never loses sense of humor. Okay, and he is even referred to be the life of the party. Okay, in London, Edinburgh, and in Paris, he had long set the standard of the ideal thinker for British philosophers. So here are the other writings of David Hume. Enquiry concerning the principles of morals in 1751, wherein he created a steer in the intellectual world. Okay, same as with his writing, Enquiry concerning human understanding in 1748. Okay, so another writing is a book of morality. Okay, during his youth, this is treatise which never received the attention it deserved. Okay, and Hume's thesis in moral philosophy was as skeptical and shocking as his thesis in epistemology. So you're gonna be some kind of skeptical, and also you will be able to analyze this kind of statements. There is no knowledge of right and wrong, and no rational defense of moral principles. Okay, so if there's no knowledge of right and wrong, then it's not actually about being right or wrong, but it's how it is on how you perceive it. It is on how you're gonna justify actually your objective or your goal in order to attain what you are doing, whether it is right or wrong in the eyes of many people. Okay, so these are based upon sentiment or feeling, and as such cannot be defended by any kind of argument, according to David Hume. Okay, so this is from A Treatise of Human Nature, one of the writing of David Hume. I may venture to affirm of the rest of mankind that they are nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity and are in perpetual flux and movement. So this brilliant philosopher will actually make you think twice about his statements, right? Okay. So the fourth one, we have Immanuel Kant. Okay, so according to Immanuel Kant, life is the subjective condition of all our possible experience. Consequently, we can only infer the permanence of the soul in life, for the death of the man is the end of all experience. Okay, so let us know more about Immanuel Kant. Okay. Immanuel Kant is actually the exact opposite of the character and personality of David Hume. If David Hume is a very humorous person, extrovert person, then David Kant is, sorry, Immanuel Kant is actually the kind of person who is very introvert. Okay, so David Hume was rejected from being a professor, while Immanuel Kant, okay, became a professor for 30 years in a university. He was never married, okay, and according to his neighbors, his life was like very what do you call this, predictable. Okay, so it's routinary. You can easily predict what he's gonna do because it's some kind of boring. Okay, according to one of the German poet, it is hard to write about Kant's life, for he had no life. Okay, so if you're gonna think of it, it's like a very boring life for Emmanuel. Okay, so aside from this, even though he's a boring person, okay, according to some writings, he is actually the greatest philosopher since Plato and Aristotle, who lived in a small town in East Prussia, Königsberg. Okay, he is also one of the most persistent defenders of the French Revolution, and in philosophy, created no less a revolution himself. Alright, so these are some of the writings of Immanuel Kant. Critic of Pure Reason, 1781. Critic of Practical Reason, 1788. Critic of Judgment, 1790. Okay, so he changed the thinking of philosophers as much as the revolution changed France. Okay, so he has this kind of central thesis. Okay, he called synthetic a priori judgment, so which means moral and religious equivalent. So it shows the necessity of this aspect of morality and religiosity for all human experience. Okay. He also escaped Hume's skepticism and avoided the dead end intuitionism of his rational predecessors. Okay, but at some point, with Kant's transcendental ego, he seemed to agree with Immanuel Kant. Okay, so he seemed to agree with David Hume, I mean. Okay, so Kant says identity is not found in self-consciousness, and the enduring self is not an object of experience. It is transcendental, wherein we can reach to this kind of level of self-actualization. Okay. So the self for Kant is also the activity of applying the rules by which we organize our experiences. We must synthesize our experiences into a unity, for we could not come to have any knowledge otherwise. He calls this the transcendental unity of a perception. The transcendental ego is basic and necessary for all human experience. So this is what you're going to remember when it comes to the concept of the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. It's the transcendental unity. or the synthesis of all our experience, wherein you're gonna merge together, okay, all of your learning, insight, all of what you have experienced, what you have gained from all of those, until you reach your transcendental ego. Okay? So at some point, Kant also object to Descartes on three grounds. Okay, number one, our concern with self-consciousness is given impetus because we are not often self-conscious. Okay, number two, Kant does not believe that the thinking self is a thinking thing because the self is not in our experience but rather responsible for it. The self is an activity which undermines the traditional concept of the soul. Okay, so according to Kant, it's not always about the thinking self. There are times that we are overpowered by our emotion, by our soul. And it's not always on the top of that, we have the brain to think. Okay, there are some point, okay, on our experiences where we express first our emotion, and that is what Kant does want us to understand on this kind of aspect. That's why he objected with the principles or the philosophy of René Descartes. Okay. Third, Kant believes that we need two very different conceptions of self. The first is that the transcendental self is essential to being a self, and the second is the idea of the empirical ego, which includes all of those particular things that make us different people. Thus allow us to differentiate between particular selves. Okay? So he mentioned from here the empirical ego and also the transcendental self, which is actually made up of the experiences, okay, that we are conscious about. So all of these elements that made up the empirical ego and transcendental self make you or make us a unique person, make it different from other people between particular selves. Okay, so that's all. Thank you and have a nice day, everyone. If you have any questions, you can reach me at psicologista.files@gmail.com.